So let's address a crisis that courts to the very heart of our democracy, a crisis manufactured under the guise of law and order. The federal government has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, effectively suspending the elected governor, the deputy governor, and members of the House of Assembly. Now, to be clear, a state of emergency is no small thing. It is a constitutional nuclear button reserved for moments when a state is on the verge of collapse, when violence, natural disaster, or war makes governance impossible. So we must ask, was the situation in Rivers State so dire that democracy had to be discarded? Was the crisis in Rivers State a political dispute fueled by intra-party conflicts and power struggles so grave that the will of the people had to be erased with one stroke of a presidential pen? Or is this simply a new playbook? A playbook where the federal government removes elected leaders under the pretext of security concerns? A playbook where the legislature, the supposed watchdog of our democracy, rolls over and plays dead while the executive branch tramples on the mandates of the people? So much for on your mandate we shall stand. Anyway, to answer these questions, we must look at the past, because our past will help us understand when has Nigeria declared a state of emergency. So for context, Nigeria has had its fair share of state of emergency declarations, but every time it was in response to clear and present danger. The first ever state of emergency was declared in Nigeria in 1962, when political tensions in the western region escalated into outright violence. This was a crisis of political thuggery, arson, and destruction, a legitimate breakdown of law and order. The second was in 1983, during the Kaduna State religious riots. The government of President Shehu Shagari, he imposed emergency rule following a violent religious crisis in Kaduna where hundreds were killed. The third was in 2004 during Plateau State ethnic clashes, where President Olusegun Obasanjo at the time declared a state of emergency in Plateau State after an ethnic violence or conflict between Christians and Muslims left thousands dead. The fourth was in 2006 during the Ekiti State political crisis. A state of emergency was imposed in Ekiti after a prolonged political crisis between the governor and the state legislature that led to governance breakdown. The fifth and final was in 2013 during the Boko Haram insurgency in Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe, the triad. Under Goodluck Jonathan, a state of emergency was declared in 3 of those northeastern states due to the unprecedented terror attacks by Boko Haram, which was swallowing entire towns, wiping away families. These were situations where lives were at stake, where anarchy had taken over. So let's compare all these cases, the 5 cases I just reeled out, and compare to Rivers. Has Rivers descended in the kind of lawlessness that requires such drastic action? The answer is no. Rivers State is not a war zone. So let's be plain. This is political maneuvering, not violent insurrection. The truth is, this is not about security. It is not about governance. It's about control. Governor Siminalayi Fubara has been at the center of a power struggle with his predecessor and political godfather, Nyesom Wike, who now serves as minister of the FCT. The battle between the two has split the state's political structure, leading to defections, legislative coups, and even legal battles. But again, does this amount to an emergency? Political disputes are not new in Nigeria. The Obasanjo-Atiku face-off didn't lead to a state of emergency. The fight between Rotimi Amechi and Goodluck Jonathan didn't lead to a state of emergency. The crisis in Kano State over the emirship has not led to a state of emergency. But in Rivers, a political crisis has suddenly become a constitutional crisis, and the solution, according to the federal government, is to suspend the democracy in the state. This, I must say, is a dangerous precedent. Today, it is Rivers. Tomorrow, it could be any state where the ruling government wants to silence opposition. And we must be careful at this point when it comes to precedents and what we are setting for our future. At this point, we have to ask, where are our lawmakers in all of this? The red and green chambers, the supposed custodians of our democracy, they have once again rubber-stamped executive overreach. The same National Assembly that should question such drastic action has endorsed it without pushback. So much for checks and balances. This is not just about Rivers State. This is about the erosion of democratic norms. When elected leaders can be dismissed like civil servants, when the rule of law is weaponized to silence opposition, when the people's votes can be disregarded so easily, it begs to ask the question, are we in a democracy? We are now, or should I say, we are an autocracy disguised as a democracy. Yes, I said it. Rivers State is a test case at best. And I must say this again, if this is allowed to stand, the next opposition governor, senator, or lawmaker, councillor, or any voice of opposition or dissent who refuses to bow will be next. So the question is, will Nigerians accept this? Or will there be pushback against the steady dismantling of our democracy, and most importantly, of opposition? Because today, it's Rivers. Tomorrow, it could be your state. And by then, there may be no one left to speak. But until then, our voices will be heard right here. Isn't that right, Mazzino?
Well, it is right. And I bet you when you come back, I'm going to give you an angle of this conversation that people have bandied about so far the past couple of days, which I find very interesting. I never considered it so. But when you look at it from an economic point of view, there's plenty to consider. But fantastic and stellar monologue there. Can't wait for you to come back so that we can talk about your missing in action from last weekend and what had happened from before.
I thought we were going to gloss over that.
Well, come through first.
Well, of course, that's my incomparable co-host, Mazzino Appeal. My name is Judith TV. Let me say welcome, and let's get started to your go-to weekend breakfast show, Breakfast Extra.